Hey everybody. This video is going to go over the sample rhetorical analysis essay that I've provided here in the week 10 module. So we're gearing up, trying to get ready for the final exam essay, which is a rhetorical analysis essay. You're going to choose from, you're going to have a handful of choices, but they're all images that we have looked at for the weekly discussions. There are 5 of them that I've picked. You will choose one of them to write your essay on. So you are already familiar with the topic that you're going to use. You've already hopefully participated in the weekly discussion, watched the follow-up video the week afterwards, and then did a journal entry kind of closing out that discussion. You are able to go back and look at my follow-up videos and your journal entries. So you already have a little bit of knowledge and preparation going into the final exam. So that's great. You're also going to be doing an outline to sort of get ready to do the final exam essay. That's also great, very helpful. But I think you also need to see another example of a rhetorical analysis essay, because you've actually already seen one. If you remember back in week 5, we covered chapter 6, which was analyzing argument. And for week 5 assignment 1, you were asked to read Chief Seattle's speech and answer a few questions about it. And then you were asked to read the follow-up essay, which was a rhetorical analysis essay that analyzed Chief Seattle's speech. So you already have a little bit of experience with rhetorical analysis essays. But this one that I've chosen to provide for you right now, I think is organized in a way that will resonate more with you, will make a little more sense, and possibly help you figure out how to go about organizing yours, because Chief Seattle's speech, even though it was originally a speech, it's being analyzed as written word, as a text. And that's not what you guys are going to be analyzing. You're going to be analyzing visual images. So the closest that I came to finding something similar is with this particular rhetorical analysis essay that we're going to go over. And it analyzes the Keep America Beautiful public service announcement from 1971, which was a commercial. It's like a 1-minute commercial. So it's still not exactly the same as the kind of images that you're going to be choosing from, but it is much closer than what a written text is. So I felt like this would be a good example for you guys to see how to go about analyzing pictures, images, and not just straight text. So underneath this video, you will see another video, and it's actually the video is of the public service announcement from 1971. So not great quality, like 1 minute long. And then underneath that video, you'll see a link to download the essay in a Word document if you would like to read it that way, but it is also copied and pasted underneath that link. So if you are reading it here on the screen, you're going to notice footnotes, like there'll be like T1 and then a little bit further down T2. Those footnotes appear underneath the essay, and they're just little moments where I'm pointing out to you what the author is doing in the analysis. If you pull it up in the Word document, they're not footnotes, they're margin comments, just like when I have gone over your rough draft. So they're margin comments. So it's a little easier to match up my comments while you're reading if you pull it up in the Word document, but you don't have to. The footnotes are there if you're looking at it on the screen. All right, so maybe pause this video and watch the public service announcement if you want. And then I want to have you read the essay, and I'm now going to hit the highlights of it, which is just going over what those footnotes or what those margin comments are pointing out to you. So the first thing that you'll see is an introductory paragraph that just explains, obviously it's going to grab the reader's attention and explain what we're looking at. So it gives some background information to help the reader understand the rest of the essay. Okay. he actually gives sort of a summary of the commercial from start to finish. You're looking at a still image, so any description you give is probably not going to be as involved as what this introductory paragraph gives, but you do want to describe what you're looking at, okay? So that the reader, because what if they're not looking at the image? So try to cover everything that, everything important that is displayed in the image, right? At the end of that introductory paragraph, we have the author's main point or his thesis statement. He says, this PSA is one of the best examples of how environmental groups can appeal to broader audiences with emotion, pathos, authority, ethos, and reasoning, logic. So for this particular analysis, this author has chosen to look at the appeals in order to analyze the overall commercial. You could also look at evidence and examples if that is part of whatever you're analyzing. You could look at how it engages the opposition, perhaps. But since we're dealing with visuals, posters, and advertisements, there's a really good chance that the majority of what that image brings out, how it tries to get our attention and persuade us of something, is probably through those appeals: pathos, ethos, and logos, right? So the next paragraph, he summarizes the commercial, and as he's summarizing it, literally from start to finish, what he's choosing to include in his summary is the emotional content of the piece, because he's discussing pathos first. So in that first paragraph about pathos, he's really just showing us all the ways that pathos makes it into the commercial. And then in the next paragraph, he then discusses and explains the use of pathos. So he described it for us where it appears in the commercial, and since it's a commercial and a minute long, he took a whole paragraph to do that. And then in the next paragraph, he provides the explanation and how that pathos strengthens the commercial's argument, right? How it works to persuade the audience. So he shows where pathos is used, and then he explains how it's used. Does that make sense? I hope so. You might not need 2 whole paragraphs to do that, because again, you're looking at a still image. So you might be able to point out where pathos is used, and then also provide the explanation of it, the analysis of it, in the same paragraph, perhaps. He goes on, and then the next section, he talks about ethos, and look at his transition. In addition to its emotional appeal, the Keep America Beautiful PSA uses a symbolic figure to create a sense of authority. So great transition. Reminded us of the main point he just got finished discussing, reminded us of the name of the PSA, and announces what this new paragraph is going to be about. The next main point is about authority or ethos. And again, he describes how ethos is used in the PSA, and then midway through, he starts analyzing the way that ethos is used. So he just like he did with pathos, he points out where ethos comes into play, and then he explains how ethos works in the argument. And then the next paragraph, he moves on to talk about logic, logos. And again, look at his transition. Finally, in addition to its appeals to pathos and ethos, the PSA uses logos to drive home its point. Nice transition. Reminded us where we just came from, reminded us we're talking about a PSA, announced the new main point, which is logos. And again, he shows us where logos is used in the PSA and follows it up with an analysis, with an explanation of how logos works in the argument. And then he has his final paragraph. He reminds us of the main points, that he discussed in the body of the essay and leaves us with a final thought about the PSA and the message it contains. So the Keep America Beautiful PSA has been a model for reaching out to the public about environmental issues. Its use of emotion, authority, and reasoning brings us face to face with our transgressions against nature. This PSA woke many people up and urged them to change their ways. Of course, the pollution problem has not been solved, but we seem to have turned the corner. Chief Iron Eyes is watching to see if we succeed. So he reminded us of everything he just talked about in the body of the essay, and then kind of left us with that final thought. So this is a great example of what you should be shooting for. And again, it's not mandatory that you look at logos, ethos, and pathos only in your analysis. If you happen to pick an option where you think the opposition is involved, then go ahead. If you want to include how values and assumptions figure into the argument, if those play a big role in your opinion, then you might want to include those in your analysis. Whatever you decide, whatever parts of the argument you decide to analyze, just make sure you make it clear in your thesis statement at the end of your first paragraph what elements of argument you're going to be looking at in the body of the essay. And then look at those elements in the same order, just like this guy did in the same order, and point out where that element is used in the argument and follow that up with an explanation. Okay, so here pathos is being used. That's great. What does that tell us though? Why is it important that pathos was being used there? How did it function in the argument? So don't forget the analysis part. Show us where the element is being used and then explain why that's important, how it functions in the argument. And then don't forget to use your transitions between your main points, right? So in addition to, furthermore, things like that. And then don't forget to give us that concluding paragraph where you remind us of everything you just discussed in the body of the essay, the main points. And it doesn't have to be word for word the way that you listed them in the introduction, but you somehow want to remind us of your main points in the essay, and then leave us with some sort of final thought or whatever to wrap it all up. So I hope this helps, seeing how this guy chose specific elements of argument to analyze, and then how he organized the elements and how he explained them. I personally would have done it in the reverse order. I would have discussed, well, actually, no. Normally, I would have discussed logic first and ended with pathos, since pathos is like the biggest, the meatiest part of the argument's appeal. But actually, what he ended up doing is he kind of worked through it in chronological order as well. It just so happens that all of the pathos, most of it, comes in the beginning. The ethos is kind of established midway through, and then the logic doesn't come until the very end. You're looking at a still image. There's no chronological order. So you have to decide the order that you want to discuss your main points. I typically go least important to most important, because you want to end with your heaviest punch, right? Your hardest punch. So, but that's up to you. However, you can make sense of the analysis and how you think the reader will best respond to your analysis. But make sure that the organization is sound, that it is solid, and that whatever order you've listed those elements in your thesis statement is the same order you discuss them in the body of the essay. Use this as kind of a guide for how to get those little overall writing details. Use this as a guide for how to point out where an element of argument is being used, and then following it up with an explanation of why that element is important to the argument, how it functions in the argument. If you have any questions about this particular sample essay, please let me know. Otherwise, you guys are free to move on to the next item in the module, and hopefully this helps you feel a little better going into the final exam essay next week.